Admiral Taeho Kim could not believe what he was seeing on his screen. The numbers made no sense. His ship, the Perseverance, was floating in empty space beyond the Great Barrier. This should have been impossible. For millions of years, that strange energy field had kept every living being trapped inside their galaxy. No one had ever crossed it. No one had even tried after the first few disasters thousands of years ago. The bridge was quiet except for the soft humming of the ship's engines. Taeho rubbed his eyes and looked at the readings again. They were still the same. His ship was definitely outside the galaxy, in the vast darkness between star systems. Through the main window he could see the Milky Way galaxy spread out like a giant spiral of light behind them. "Captain," said Lieutenant Soo-Jin Park from her station. She was the ship's communications officer, and her voice sounded nervous. "We are getting messages from the Galactic Council. Lots of them. They want to know how we got here." Captain Minwoo Lee walked over to look at the messages. He had been exploring space for 20 years, but he had never seen anything like this. The messages were coming in different languages from dozens of alien species. All of them sounded angry and confused. "What should I tell them, sir?" asked Soo-Jin. Minwoo smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "Tell them we will explain everything once they figure out how to follow us out here." Far away, in the center of the galaxy, the Galactic Council was having an emergency meeting. The council station was huge, bigger than most moons. It had been built by many different alien species working together. Representatives from hundreds of worlds lived and worked there. In the main meeting hall, Ambassador Lixthor was very upset. He belonged to a species called the Zentani Collective. His people looked like giant octopuses, but they were very smart. Right now, Lixthor was using all 6 of his arms to hit the table. "This cannot be real," he shouted. "The Great Barrier has been there for 3 million years. Our ancestors tried to cross it. They all died or disappeared. It is like trying to walk through a mountain." High Counselor Vexera was older and calmer. She came from the Hellion Empire, one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. Her people looked like tall, thin humans with blue skin and silver eyes. They were known for being very wise and careful. "I have been studying these readings for the past hour," Vexera said slowly. "Our best scientists have always said the barrier was a law of nature, like gravity or time, something that could never be changed or broken. But the humans have broken it," said another voice. Everyone turned to look at Dr. Naun Choi, the human representative. She had been called to the emergency meeting just a few hours ago. She was still wearing her regular clothes instead of the fancy robes that most council members wore. "And yet here we are," Naun said simply. "Our ship is outside the galaxy. Your instruments can detect it. This is not a trick or a mistake." The room became very quiet. Representatives from dozens of species looked at each other with confusion and fear. Some of them had tentacles instead of arms. Others had scales or feathers. A few looked almost human, while others were so strange that they needed special suits to survive in the station's atmosphere. "How?" asked a representative from the Silicon Brotherhood. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "How did you do what we have always been told was impossible?" Naun stood up straighter. She was much smaller than most of the other beings in the room, but she did not seem afraid. "We did not know it was supposed to be impossible. When we found the barrier, we saw it as a problem to solve, not a wall to accept." "But the mathematics," shouted Dr. Quelm from the Crystalline Collective. "We have calculated the energy needed to cross that field. It would require more power than our entire civilization produces in a century." "Maybe your mathematics were wrong," Naun replied. "Or maybe you were asking the wrong questions." Back on the Perseverance, the crew was busy studying their surroundings. They had brought the best equipment Earth could build, but everything felt strange out here. The stars looked different. Space itself seemed to work differently beyond the barrier. "Sir," called out Science Officer Eugene Bay, "I am getting some very weird readings. It is like the laws of physics are slightly different out here. Not completely different, but softer somehow." Captain Minwoo nodded. "That matches what our theory predicted. The barrier was not just keeping us in. It was also keeping something else out. Or maybe it was changing how reality works inside our galaxy." Lieutenant Dong Hyun Lim looked up from his station. "Captain, should we go back? What if we cannot return? What if the barrier closes behind us?" Minwoo thought about this for a moment. It was a good question. They had tested their equipment many times, but no one had ever actually crossed the barrier before. They were making history, but they were also taking a huge risk. "We knew this was dangerous when we started," Minwoo said finally. "But think about what this means. For the first time in millions of years, Someone has proven that the impossible is just another word for something we have not figured out yet. On the council station, the emergency meeting was getting more intense. Some representatives wanted to send ships to bring the humans back. Others wanted to study what they had done. A few were talking about declaring humans too dangerous to exist. They have broken one of the fundamental rules of reality, said General Korth from the Iron Legion. If they can break the barrier, what else might they break? What if they accidentally destroy something important? Or what if they can teach us to do the same? Asked Dr. Naun quietly. The room went silent again. For millions of years, every species in the galaxy had accepted the barrier as an absolute limit. They had built their entire civilizations around the idea that some things could never be changed. Now, a young species that had only been traveling in space for a few hundred years had proven them all wrong. 3 months had passed since the Perseverance crossed the Great Barrier. During that time, the Galactic Council had called together the smartest beings from every corner of the galaxy. Scientists, engineers, and researchers who had spent thousands of years studying the mysteries of space all gathered in one place. They all wanted to understand one thing: how had the humans done the impossible? The meeting hall was packed. Creatures with tentacles sat next to beings made of living crystal. Some representatives breathed different gases and had to wear special masks. Others existed as pure energy and appeared as glowing balls of light. All of them were considered the greatest minds their species had ever produced. Dr. Ji-hoon Yoon stood at the center of the hall. He was a human physicist who had helped design the barrier-crossing technology. Looking around the room, he could see beings whose ancestors had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. Some of these civilizations were millions of years old. Their science was so advanced that humans could barely understand it. But somehow, humans had done something none of these ancient species could do. "Thank you all for coming," Ji-hoon began. His voice was translated into dozens of languages by the council's computers. "I know you have many questions about how we crossed the barrier. The answer is actually quite simple." Several alien scientists made sounds that their translators turned into laughter. Simple? Nothing about the Great Barrier was simple. The key, Ji-hoon continued, was not trying to fight the barrier. We did not try to smash through it or overpower it. Instead, we tried to understand what it really was. He pressed a button, and a holographic image appeared in the air above him. It showed the Great Barrier as a shimmering wall of energy that surrounded their entire galaxy. All of you have studied this field for thousands of years. You have always seen it as a solid wall that could not be crossed. But we looked at it differently. To us, it seemed more like a soap bubble or a cell membrane. Something that could be passed through if you approached it the right way. Kulmesh, a scientist from the Vraxian hegemony, made a sound like grinding metal. His species looked like walking machines made of black crystal. "This is nonsense," his translator announced. "We have run the mathematics thousands of times. The quantum calculations prove that any ship trying to cross the barrier would be torn apart by the energy forces. The power requirements alone are impossible." Dr. Eunju Kang stepped forward. She was even younger than Ji-hoon, barely 30 years old. Many of the aliens in the room had been alive longer than human civilization had existed. But she smiled confidently as she faced them. "That is exactly where you made your mistake," she said. "You spent all your time calculating why it was impossible. We spent our time calculating how it might be possible." She activated her own holographic display. Complex equations and diagrams filled the air around her. Most of the alien scientists could not understand the human mathematics, but they could see that it was completely different from anything they had ever tried. "We call this failure-forward engineering," Eunju explained. "Every time we hit a problem that seemed impossible to solve, we wrote down exactly why it did not work. Then we designed 17 different ways it could theoretically work instead." 17? Asked Dr. Prilnova from the Photonic Collective. Her species existed as beings made of light, so she appeared as a glowing blue humanoid shape. "Sometimes more," Eunju replied. "The point was not to find the perfect solution right away. The point was to find every possible solution, even the crazy ones. Most of them failed when we tested them. But every failure taught us something new." Elder Xiphon spoke up. He was from the Crystalline Conclave, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. His people had been studying science for over 10 million years. When he spoke, his ancient voice filled the entire hall. "So you are saying that eventually one of your wild theories worked?" "Exactly," said a new voice. Everyone turned to see Captain Hyjin Nam enter the hall. She was the human who had actually piloted the first ship through the barrier. Her presence caused a stir among the alien observers. To them she was like a legend come to life. "We did not break any laws of physics," Hygiene explained as she walked to the center of the room. We just found ways around them that your mathematical models never considered. She gestured to the holographic displays around her. You see, all of your calculations were based on the assumption that the barrier was solid and unchanging. But what if it was not? What if it was more like a living thing that could be persuaded rather than forced? A gaseous entity named Wispdar floated closer. His species existed as intelligent clouds of gas, so he looked like a small storm system hovering in the air. Are you suggesting the barrier is alive? Not exactly, Ji-hoon answered. But we discovered that it responds to certain types of energy patterns. Instead of trying to punch through it, we learned to negotiate with it. The alien scientists looked at each other in confusion. Many of them had spent centuries trying to understand the barrier using the most advanced mathematics in the galaxy. The idea that it could be negotiated with seemed almost magical. Dr. Quelm from the Silicon Brotherhood spoke up. His voice sounded like rocks tumbling down a mountain. Show us your calculations. Show us exactly how you did this. Unju smiled and began expanding her holographic display. Soon the entire hall was filled with human equations and diagrams. The alien scientists studied them carefully, their various forms of eyes, sensors, and detection organs focused intently on the information. After several minutes, a strange sound filled the hall. It was the sound of hundreds of different species all expressing the same emotion. Amazement. Your mathematics are completely wrong, said Kolmesh finally. According to everything we know about science, these equations should not work. And yet, Hygiene said with a small smile, here we are. The hall fell silent as the implications sank in. For millions of years, the greatest minds in the galaxy had been limited by their own assumptions about what was possible. A young species with wrong mathematics had succeeded where they had all failed. The most brilliant beings in the galaxy were about to learn that sometimes, being wrong in the right way was better than being right in the wrong way. News of humanity's breakthrough spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within weeks, every major civilization knew that the impossible had become possible. The Great Barrier, which had been an absolute fact of life for millions of years, was no longer absolute. On the distant world of Kepler 442b, Captain Dong-hyun Lim stood on the bridge of the colony ship New Horizon. Through the main window, he could see construction robots building humanity's first settlement outside their home galaxy. Giant metal beams were being assembled into the framework of what would become New Terra Station. The work was going well, but Dong-hyun's mind was on other matters. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy, and most of them were not good news. Captain, called Communications Officer Eugene Bay from her station. I have the latest reports from Galactic Council Intelligence. Go ahead, Dong-hyun replied, though he was not sure he wanted to hear what she had to say. 3 different species have tried to copy our barrier crossing method, Eugene said, reading from her screen. The hegemony of Klex sent a fleet of 12 ships. They all exploded the moment they touched the barrier. The crystal monarchies tried a different approach using their psychic abilities. Their ships made it halfway through before they were crushed by gravitational forces. Dong-hyun winced. He had been afraid something like this would happen. And the third attempt? The Morphic Alliance tried to use their shape-changing technology to flow through the barrier like liquid. Eugene paused and looked up at him. They accidentally created a temporary black hole. It swallowed 3 of their planets before it collapsed. The bridge became very quiet. Everyone knew what this meant. Other species were so desperate to copy humanity's success that they were taking incredible risks. And they were failing in spectacular ways. How many casualties? Dong-hyun asked quietly. Over 2 billion beings, sir. And that is just from the 3 major attempts. Intelligence says dozens of smaller expeditions have also failed. Dong-hyun closed his eyes. This was exactly what he had been worried about. When humans had first crossed the barrier, they had been careful. They had run thousands of tests and built multiple safety systems. But other species were trying to rush the process and the results were catastrophic. Meanwhile, far away in the center of the galaxy, the Galactic Council was in complete chaos. Emergency Session 7439 was underway, which meant they had been meeting almost non-stop for 3 months. The Great Assembly Hall was packed with representatives from hundreds of worlds, and everyone was talking at once. Representative Korth from the Titanium League was particularly angry. His people were machine-based life forms who looked like walking robots made of gleaming metal. When Korth was upset, his voice became so loud it could damage sensitive hearing organs. This madness must stop, he shouted, hitting the speaker's podium with his metallic fist. The sound echoed through the hall like a gong. These humans have destroyed the natural order of our galaxy. Before they came, we had peace and stability. Now we have chaos and death. Many of the other representatives made sounds of agreement. The gaseous collective released clouds of steam that meant they were worried. The Insectoid Federation clicked their mandibles in distress. Even the usually calm aquatic republics were churning the water in their tanks. But not everyone agreed with Korth. Dr. Jae-min Shin, humanity's chief expert on alien cultures, stood up to respond. He was one of only 3 humans allowed to speak in the council sessions, and his presence always caused tension. Natural order? Jae-min asked, raising one eyebrow. Is that what you call it? Or do you mean the limitations you placed on yourselves because you were too afraid to fail? The hall erupted in angry sounds from dozens of different species. Some representatives shouted in languages that sounded like music. Others made noises like grinding machinery or breaking glass. A few species expressed anger by changing colors or releasing chemical signals. Silence, called High Priestess Yelnara of the Ethereal Dominion. Her voice had a strange, haunting quality that made everyone stop talking immediately. Her people were energy beings who appeared as glowing, shifting shapes of light. When she spoke, reality itself seemed to listen. The human speaks harshly but perhaps not without truth, Yelnara said. Her voice echoed strangely as if it was coming from everywhere at once. For 60 million cycles, we have lived within the barrier's embrace. It has defined us, shaped us, and yes, limited us. But it has also protected us from the vast unknown that lies beyond our galaxy. Dr. So-Young Han, another human representative, stood up. She was a philosopher and historian who had spent years studying galactic civilizations. And now you are discovering that your protection was actually a prison of your own making. The words hit the assembly like a physical blow. For millions of years, every major civilization had accepted the barrier as an unbreakable law of nature. They had built their entire cultures around the idea that some things were simply impossible. We never asked to be freed from this prison, shouted Ambassador Vextai of the Crystal Singers. We were content with our limitations. Were you really? Asked Jae-min. Then why are your people risking everything to try to cross the barrier? Why are entire fleets destroying themselves in desperate attempts to follow us? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around the galaxy, species that had lived peacefully for millions of years were suddenly taking enormous risks. Ancient civilizations were throwing away their careful, conservative approaches to science and trying wild, dangerous experiments. While this debate raged, humanity continued its expansion beyond the galaxy. Commander Woojin Park, leading the Deep Space Exploration Fleet, sent regular reports back to Earth and the Council. We have reached the edge of the Andromeda approach vector, his latest message reported. Long-range sensors have detected 17 different galactic formations within reach of our current technology. But here is the interesting part. Each galaxy appears to have its own version of the Great Barrier. This news caused even more excitement and fear among the galactic civilizations. If every galaxy had its own barrier, then the universe was far stranger and more complex than anyone had imagined. We have also detected signs of intelligent life beyond several of these barriers, Woojin continued. It appears that other civilizations have faced the same limitations we did. Some may have overcome them while others remain trapped. The implications were staggering. Humanity had not just broken free from their own prison. They had discovered that the entire universe was full of prisons, and some of them might not be empty. The cascade effect was accelerating. Ancient assumptions were crumbling. The galaxy would never be the same. 6 months had passed since the first human ship crossed the Great Barrier. In that time, the galaxy had been turned upside down. Ancient civilizations were questioning everything they thought they knew about the universe. The Galactic Council was meeting every day, but they could not agree on what to do about the humans. Deep beneath the Council's main station, in archives that had not been opened for millions of years, Supreme Archivist Melthara made a discovery that would change everything. Melthara belonged to a species called the Memory Keepers. Her people looked like tall, thin beings made of living glass, and they could store vast amounts of information in their crystalline bodies. For over 50,000 years, Melthara had been the keeper of the galaxy's oldest records. She had access to files that were so ancient, most people had forgotten they existed. But the human breakthrough had made her curious about the true origins of the Great Barrier. So she had spent weeks searching through records that dated back to the very beginning of galactic civilization. What she found shocked her. The emergency assembly was called immediately. Representatives from every major species gathered in the Great Hall. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone knew that Melthara only called emergency meetings when she had discovered something extremely important. Fellow beings of the galaxy, Melthora began, her voice ringing like crystal bells. I have spent the last month researching the origins of the Great Barrier. What I have found will change how we understand our entire history. She activated the ancient holographic systems. Images that were millions of years old began to appear in the air above the assembly. The pictures showed beings that looked nothing like any current galactic species. They were tall and graceful, with features that seemed to shift and change as you looked at them. The barrier was not a natural phenomenon, Melthora announced. It was created by the Ancient Ones, the civilizations that came before us. They called it a safety constraint. The hall erupted in shocked sounds. Representatives began talking to each other in dozens of different languages. Some species expressed surprise by changing colors. Others released chemical signals or made musical tones. Admiral Sung-Ho Kim, representing the human fleet, leaned forward in his seat. He was one of the few humans allowed to attend council meetings, and he had been following the discussion with great interest. Why did they build it? He asked. Melthora manipulated the holographic display, showing ancient text that had been translated into modern galactic languages. According to these records, the Ancient Ones had experienced something they called the expansion wars. When young civilizations developed faster than light travel, they spread across the galaxy too quickly. They fought over resources and territory, causing conflicts that nearly destroyed all intelligent life. She paused to let this information sink in. The barrier was designed to prevent this from happening again. It would keep each new civilization contained until they were mature enough to expand safely. Counselor Thexmiron of the Void Walkers made a sound like static electricity. His people were energy beings who existed in the spaces between dimensions. When they were upset, reality seemed to flicker around them. Are you saying, Thexmiron asked slowly, that we have spent millions of years building our entire civilizations around what was essentially training wheels? The question hit the assembly like a physical blow. For countless generations, every species in the galaxy had accepted the barrier as an unchangeable law of nature. They had based their science, their philosophy, and their entire way of life on the assumption that some things were simply impossible. Dr. Kyung-Suk Lee, humanity's lead historian, stood up. She had been studying the translated archives on her personal device. According to these records, your species were supposed to naturally develop the ability to cross the barrier as you matured. It was meant to be a test, not a permanent prison. She manipulated her own display, showing charts and graphs from the ancient files. The Ancient Ones expected that after a few million years of development, each civilization would figure out how to transcend the barrier on their own. But instead, you all treated it as an absolute law and never even tried. The implications were staggering. Every major civilization in the galaxy had failed a test they did not even know they were taking. They had been trapped by their own assumptions and fear of failure. Military Commander Voss of the Iron Coalition stood up abruptly. His species looked like living suits of armor, and when he moved, metal plates clinked together like chain mail. This changes nothing, Voss declared, his voice booming through the hall. The humans are still dangerous. They have proven they will break any rule, ignore any limitation. What happens when they decide to break something even more fundamental than the barrier? What if they accidentally destroy the galaxy? Many representatives made sounds of agreement. The fear in the room was real. If humans could casually break a barrier that had contained civilizations for millions of years, what else might they break? But Chief Scientist Prill Nova of the Crystal Spheres disagreed. Her people were living beings made of intelligent crystal, and they glowed softly when they were excited about new ideas. Commander Voss, you are missing the point, Prill Nova said, her crystalline body pulsing with blue light. The humans have not broken anything. They have shown us that our understanding of reality itself was flawed. For millions of years, we have been limiting ourselves based on incorrect assumptions. She gestured to the ancient displays still floating in the air. These records prove that we were meant to grow beyond our limitations. The humans have not destroyed the natural order. They have reminded us what the natural order actually is. Admiral Sung-Ho Kim listened to the debate with growing concern. He could see that the galaxy was dividing into two camps. Some wanted to contain humanity before they could cause more changes. Others wanted to learn from humanity and try to transcend their own limitations. The choice is yours, he said finally, standing up to address the assembly. You can try to put us back in the box and pretend that nothing has changed. Or you can accept that the universe is bigger and stranger than any of us imagined. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes, sensors, and other detection organs of dozens of different species. But I should warn you. We have already detected 17 other galaxies within range of our ships. Each one has its own barriers and limitations. Some of them contain civilizations that might be even older and more powerful than the ancient ones. The hall fell silent as the full scope of the situation became clear. Humanity had not just broken free from one prison. They had discovered that the entire universe was full of prisons, and some of them might contain things that were better left locked away. The Galactic Council faced an impossible choice. They could try to contain a species that had already proven capable of the impossible. Or they could accept that their entire understanding of reality needed to be rebuilt from scratch. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same. 1 year had passed since the first human ship crossed the Great Barrier. In that time, the galaxy had changed more than it had in the previous million years. Ancient civilizations had been forced to question everything they thought they knew about the universe. Some species had tried to copy humanity's methods and failed catastrophically. Others had demanded that humans be stopped before they broke something even more important. But after months of debate, arguments, and emergency meetings, the Galactic Council had finally made a decision. Instead of trying to contain humanity, they would ask for their help. The ceremony took place on a brand new research station called Unity. It had been built right at the edge of where the Great Barrier used to be, in the space between galaxies. The station was huge, designed to accommodate representatives from hundreds of different species. Some needed to breathe water, others required toxic gases, and a few existed as pure energy. The station had to provide for all of them. President Wyung Park of the United Earth Colony Federation stood in the main assembly hall. Around her were beings so ancient and powerful that their civilizations had been exploring space when Earth was still a ball of molten rock. Some of them had reluctantly come to ask humanity for help. Dr. Taejun Seo, humanity's chief engineer, was explaining their methods to the assembled representatives. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair, and he spoke in simple, direct language that the translation systems could easily handle. The funny thing is, Taejun said, we never saw the barrier as a limit. To us, it was just another engineering problem that needed to be solved. The reaction from the alien representatives was mixed. Some made sounds of confusion. Others seemed frustrated by the simplicity of his explanation. How could something that had stumped the galaxy's greatest minds for millions of years be just another engineering problem? Elder Primarch Zelthon spoke up. He was from a species so old that they had been around when the first stars formed. His people looked like living shadows that occasionally solidified into vaguely humanoid shapes. When he spoke, his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. Human Taejun, Zelthon said, and there was something like embarrassment in his ancient voice. We have spent eons perfecting our understanding of what was possible within our constraints. You have shown us that the constraints themselves were changeable. It was difficult for him to say those words. His species had spent 20 million years believing that some things were absolutely impossible. Now a species that had only been in space for a few hundred years had proven them wrong. President Wyung Park nodded respectfully. We are honored to share what we have learned. But I should warn you, we are not planning to stop with just the Great Barrier. This caused a stir among the representatives. What did the humans mean? What else were they planning to break? Commander Eugene Choi stepped forward. She was the captain of humanity's newest exploration vessel, the Boundary Walker. In her hands, she carried a holographic projector that contained humanity's most ambitious project yet. We call it the Infinite Bridge Protocol, Eugene announced as she activated the device. The holographic display filled the center of the hall. It showed a complex diagram of what looked like tunnels connecting not just different galaxies, but different dimensions of reality itself. The alien representatives stared at the display in shock. We believe we can create stable, permanent passages not just between galaxies, but between the dimensional barriers we have detected beyond normal space and time, Eugene explained. The hall erupted in sounds of alarm. Some species made noises like breaking glass. Others released clouds of gas or changed colors rapidly. A few simply flickered in and out of existence, which was how they expressed extreme surprise. Science Director Quelnara of the Photonic Collective spoke for many of them. Her species existed as beings made of living light, so she appeared as a glowing humanoid figure. You are talking about transcending reality itself, she said, and her voice carried a mixture of terror and excitement. You want to break the barriers between dimensions. Do you have any idea what might be waiting on the other side? Dr. Sunmi Kong, one of humanity's youngest and most brilliant physicists, smiled at the question. It was the same smile that early human explorers might have worn when they first saw the ocean and wondered what lay beyond the horizon. We prefer to think of it as graduating to the next level, Sunmi replied. Every time we have pushed beyond what we thought were absolute limits, we have discovered that the universe is bigger and more wonderful than we imagined. As the formal alliance ceremony began, Captain Suk-Jin-yoon was working on the bridge of his research ship in orbit around the station. He had just received the data from humanity's first probe into what they were calling extra-dimensional space. The results were staggering. "Send this to the council immediately," Suk-Jin ordered his communications officer. "They need to see this." The data showed that what everyone had thought was the universe was actually just one layer of countless nested realities. Each layer had its own set of physical laws, its own barriers and its own limitations. Some layers contained forms of life so strange that human minds could barely comprehend them. On the bridge of humanity's newest deep space exploration vessel, Admiral Haewon Kim reviewed the probe data with her crew. She was a veteran of humanity's expansion beyond Earth, but even she was amazed by what they were discovering. "Begin preparations for Project Multiverse," she ordered. "It is time to see what other impossible things are waiting for us out there." Her crew began working with the enthusiasm that had made humanity famous throughout the galaxy. They approached the barriers between realities the same way they had approached the Great Barrier, not as walls that could not be crossed but as doors waiting to be opened. Back on the Unity Station, the formal alliance between humanity and the Galactic Council was signed. Ancient species that had never changed their ways agreed to learn new methods from a young civilization. It was unprecedented in galactic history. But as the ceremony ended, many of the alien representatives found themselves wondering what they had gotten themselves into. The humans were already talking about their next project, exploring dimensions beyond the known universe. The Galactic Council could only watch as humanity prepared to casually break the next fundamental law of existence. They treated the barriers between realities like they had treated the Great Barrier, not as absolute limits but as interesting puzzles to be solved. For better or worse, the galaxy was about to discover that the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had ever imagined. And humanity was going to make sure everyone came along for the ride.